Hello, you are on the Ruslan Belov channel, and we are starting our daily review of the Ukrainian front. So friends, very good news is coming from the front, as there have been many advances in various sectors, and today we'll start with you from the south, with a very important breakthrough that happened in the Zaporizhzhia region. See the red line? That's the line of contact that was marked here on the map a day ago. And where is it now? Now it's already in the neighboring village, in Primorsk. So what happened here? It was possible to drive out the armed forces of Ukraine from the remaining part of Plavny and take the village under full control. In total, Plavny is now under Russian control, and from Plavny, Russian fighters have entered the next village along the railway, Primorsk. The village, as you can see on the map, is very large, like a mini-city. Because it stretches along the reservoir for 10 kilometers, can you imagine? Even now, during the fighting, about 1,000 people still remain in it, and before the war, more than 4,000 lived there. In general, it won't be easy, but Russian fighters have already entered the village. I can't tell you exactly how well they've consolidated there yet, because from the Ukrainian side, there are videos of them taking Russian fighters prisoner who advanced further along Pokrovsk Street here. At the same time, if you look at what Ukrainian military experts are writing, they assess the situation for themselves as extremely difficult. Therefore, Russian troops are pressing here, and pressing very hard. And, jumping ahead a bit, if it succeeds in taking Primorsk under control, this will greatly change the situation on the entire Zaporizhzhia front. Because with access to the northern outskirts of the village, it will be 14 kilometers to Zaporizhzhia. Well, okay, for now, these are just prospects. Here, it's important not only to take Primorsk, but also Stepnohursk, and then the position will become more stable. Now information is coming in that Russian infantry groups are infiltrating the village, I mean Stepnohursk, but so far there's no specifics. So we're waiting. In general, the Zaporizhzhia direction is not too active yet, because if we take neighboring sectors, like Orikhiv or Huliaipol, the front line isn't changing at all. And at the moment, movement is only here in the south, and in the area of Stepnohursk, and in the north. In the north, over the past day, it was also possible to regain previously lost positions in the area of Timirivka and in the village itself. At the same time, very good news also came over the past day from Pokrovsk. Friends, I ask for a minute of your attention. As usual, I want to sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel if you're watching my videos not for the first time and aren't subscribed. Please subscribe. Your subscription helps the channel's development. Thank you to those who subscribed, and we continue. So moving to the Pokrovsk sector, we discussed it in detail in yesterday's release, but over the past day, the situation has changed. Russian troops managed to drive out the armed forces of Ukraine from the suburb of Pokrovsk called Kozazme, or the village also called Leontievichi. Moreover, there was information before that, I told you about it too, that the AFU pushed back Russian troops from the village, but as often happens, all their efforts ultimately turned into a failure for them. And here, it's not so much important that it was possible to occupy the village closest to the city, but that it was possible to take control of the height. See this waste dump? Now it's under Russian control, and thus the key height in this sector is controlled by Russians, which means the entire sector will be controlled by fire and more or less protected from any counterattacks from the AFU side. Now, after occupying First May, it's important to develop the success to the north, here to the M30 highway. From the current positions to its physical cutting, it's less than 3 kilometers. That is, it's clear that it's already under drone control, but to physical cutting, it's still 3 kilometers. In general, this task was assigned to the western flank, not the central group that's moving here, but the western flank is stuck in the area of Kotlin and hasn't been able to move the front since February, so it seems this task will have to be carried out this way. In any case, if this highway is cut, Pokrovsk is done. By the end of the year, Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad, I think Russian troops will definitely take then. Well, the front configuration here is such that I don't know what would have to happen for the AFU to hold these cities. At the same time, messages have also started coming in that Russian troops have taken control of the urban-type settlement Udakne on the western flank. I spoke about this event a week ago, and now there are just additional confirmations. The event is undoubtedly important, as this settlement absorbed quite a few Russian forces. Well, they took it, And now what? And next is the tiny village of Molodetske, consisting of one street stretching for a kilometer, and the Dnipropetrovsk region with a direct road to Mezhova. Although I think the priority will still be the offensive to the north, bypassing the mine, and then to Serhivka. The goal is the same, to cut the last road leading to Pokrovsk. Let's move a bit east on the map. Active offensive actions continue into the northern part of Mirnohrad, and information is coming in that active combat has already begun on the outskirts of this settlement. Chervony Lyman is also gradually coming under the control of the Russian army, with active offensive actions continuing on the southern outskirts of this settlement. From Rodinske, no updated information is coming in yet. Not long ago, there was unconfirmed information that a large part of this settlement has come under the control of the Russian army, but fighting is still ongoing here. So we'll keep an eye on this settlement. At the same time, the Russian offensive continues on another city, on Kostiantynivka. Here, over the past day, Russian fighters advanced 1 kilometer 300 meters east of Klebanbyk, with the general direction toward Pleshchivka and Nelipivka. To the latter from the current positions, it's about 1.5 kilometers. Well, this is a cascade of 3 villages: Nelipivka, Pleshchivka, and Ivanopilia, the last AFU defense node protecting the city from the southeast. From the south in general, the road is open. From the east too, since it was possible to take both Bila Hora and Alexandro Shultine. And from the southeast, this node here. We're slowly approaching it. Also, over the past day, there was advancement on the Lyman sector, in particular in the village of Zarichny. Here, the fighters advanced in the residential area by 700 Mitten and took control of Luhova Street. I'll say this, it's tough here, guys. The village is large, the village is fortified, and we have to dig in like this, fighting for every house, for every meter. But at the same time, the village is extremely important. First, taking it will remove any questions about Torsky, because as long as the AFU is present here, full control over Torsky is impossible, as they'll constantly pour fire on you from the opposite bank. But even more important is that control over Zarichny will allow a full-fledged movement toward Lyman. See, the road is open here without any problems in the form of settlements. Therefore, the fighting here is now extremely fierce. Both we and the Ukrainian troops understand the significance of the settlement. Well, and let's go to the Kharkiv region. Over the past day, there were also certain successes there. It was possible to advance more than 3 kilometers in the area of Borivska Andreevka and take control of an area of more than 4 square kilometers. But perhaps the more important advance was in the Sumy region, in Yunakivka. It was possible to drive out the AFU from the eastern part of the village, taking control of the 2 remaining streets, and essentially you can see this on the map too. Under AFU control in Yunakivka, only the southern outskirts of the village remain. The countdown to when Yunakivka will come under full Russian control has already gone to days. Active combat continues along the entire line of contact on the entire Orikhiv direction. Here, so far without changes, except for Kamenske and Stepnohirsk. Therefore, let's move with you to the South Donetsk direction toward Olhivska and Poltavka. Now fighting continues on the outskirts of Poltavka, as well as in the settlement of Olhivska. And the territories from Malinivka to Levadne have come under the control of the Russian army, as well as the territories north of Olhivska from Levadne to Temirivka. They are also under the control of the armed forces of the RF. And now active combat is concentrated in the settlement of Olhivsky, as well as on the southern outskirts of Poltavka. Let's move with you north on the map towards Zaporizhzhye. As of today, Temirivka, Zaporizhzhye and Novogorgivka are fully under the control of the Russian army. Also, active combat is now being conducted in Obratne and Novomykolaivka. The entire territory from Voskresenka to Shevchenki and Maliivka, marked in grey, has also come under the control of the armed forces of the RF as of today. And now active combat is being conducted in Vorone. As for this pocket around Kamishevaka, as of today, active offensive actions are being conducted from the side of Novogorgivka, as well as near Voronovo. And gradually this entire territory is being encircled, and now active combat is already being conducted in Kamishevaka. and the Russian army is gradually clearing these territories and taking them under its control. Also, unconfirmed information is coming in that active combat has begun in the settlement of Berezov, and launches by FPV drone crews have been made at AFU deployment sites in the settlement of Turnov. Let's move a bit north on the map toward Alexandrograd and Sikhneva. As you know, Alexandrograd, Voskresenka and Malievka are fully under the control of the Russian army, and active offensive actions continue from these settlements toward Sikhneva. And now active combat is ongoing here in this settlement. Also, information is coming in about launches by FPV drone crews at AFU deployment sites in the settlements of Novoselivka and Lisne. In Andriivka Klevtsov, the situation remains disputed, but news is coming in that the northern part of this settlement is under AFU control, and now active combat is being conducted in the southern part of this settlement. Also, the AFU, in turn, conducted counter-offensive actions toward the settlements of Tolsty and Zeleny High, which are under the control of the Russian army, and now active combat is being conducted in these settlements for control over them. In total, Ukraine lost another 15.3 square kilometers of territory over the day. The front continues to move forward. Let's zoom out the map with you and move to the Kupiansk direction toward Kupiansk itself. As you know, not long ago, active combat was taking place on the northern outskirts of this settlement. However, both yesterday and the day before, information came in that this part of the northern buildings of Kupiansk has come under the control of the Russian army. And today, information is coming in that this part of the territories has also come under the control of the Russian army, and active offensive actions continue into the center of this settlement. There is also information that east of the center of this settlement, active combat is being conducted, and the armed forces of the RF have already entered this point indicated on the map. And combat is ongoing now. Moskovkovka is fully under the control of the Russian army, and now active combat is ongoing in Sobolivka. Also, offensive actions are being conducted toward the supply road leading to Kupiansk. If Sobolivka comes under the control of the Russian army, then the path to the supply road will be open, as now the AFU is trying to protect this supply road and is conducting fierce battles in Sobolivka itself, delivering supplies to Sobolivka along the road leading to Kupiansk. So, we continue to monitor Sobolivka and Kupiansk itself. And let's move a bit north on the map. The majority of Kondrashivka is under the control of the Russian army. However, active counter-offensive actions are being conducted by the AFU into this settlement, namely from the side of Mala Shapkivka, Velika Shapkivka, and Tishchenkivka. Let's zoom out the map with you and move north toward Milov, Katne, and Ambana. As you know, Milov and the majority of territories near Katne and Amban are under the control of the Russian army. And now, active combat is ongoing in Ambane and Katne themselves, which are under AFU control, and the Russian army continues to press in these settlements, trying to take them under its control. However, the AFU, in turn, is conducting launches by FPV drone crews at deployment sites of Russian army personnel and reserves in the settlement of Milov. The armed forces of Russia have entered the northern part of Kupiansk, which has great strategic importance for the war and will become a sensitive loss for the AFU. There are at least 4 reasons for this, considering the historical past of this special city, located 100 kilometers from Kharkiv. The day before, the RF armed forces occupied Kondrashivka, a small village north of the city of Kupiansk. This secured the flank of the group of Russian troops advancing from the north as well and allowed the start of movement toward the urban development. In this case, it's about the usual tactic aimed at avoiding enemy counterattacks. In parallel, motorized riflemen have consolidated in Sobolivka near the Mali-Rovny forest to the west of the city. This is not the now legendary Serebryansky forestry. The forest there is small and unfortified. Presumably, the goal is the N26 highway, which runs between Sobolivka and Blahodatna toward Chuhuiv and further to Kharkiv. This is the last supply highway for the AFU grouping in Kupiansk. The terrain there is such that there is no other opportunity to deliver ammunition or conduct rotation. You can't transport much across fields and through the forest. The highway is already under fire control of the RF armed forces, so the AFU's capabilities are gradually collapsing. And in Blahodatne, according to preliminary data, street fighting is already underway. which means the end of centralized supply for the Kupiansk grouping from Chuhuiv and Kharkiv. Now, the only possibility for the AFU to exit the city is straight south, to the junction and the Osinov farm, which will lead to heavy losses. The N26 highway runs through Kupiansk in its narrow central part, Kuznechna, Centralna, and Svatovska streets, and then goes across the bridge over the Oskil River to Zaoskolia, the eastern industrial part of the city. This section, Kuznechna and Centralna streets, may become the main tactical objective of the RF armed forces in the Kupiansk urban area. The point is that the AFU has seriously fortified its positions in the city, especially in the industrial part. Bunkers and underground passages were built, connecting both individual positions and enterprise basements. Therefore, the attempt to assault the industrial district from the east was unsuccessful, and the decision was made to first put under control the western part of the city up to the N26 highway, thereby blocking any supply possibilities for the AFU grouping in the industrial zone. Currently, this fortified area is serviced via the bridge over the Oskil. Traditionally, the AFU offers main resistance closer to the central and southern districts of the liberated settlements. However, the city administration building with the Taras Shevchenko monument and the Holodomor memorial are much less useful objects than the N26 highway. Upon losing control over it, the eastern part of the city will be blocked without chances for salvation for the Ukrainian grouping, either surrender or die. Some military experts claim that the RF armed forces have already occupied the northern industrial zone of the city. We're talking about the complex of buildings of the Kharkiv Gaz branch, as well as the Agratone agricultural warehouses. Through this section, it was possible to advance to the Komsomol Park and the Spartak Stadium. However, the northern, northwestern, and western parts of Kupiansk are predominantly private sector, and multi-story or low-rise buildings begin right beyond the Komsomol Park. On the eastern bank of the Oskil, fierce battles continue in Petropavlivka, which covers the industrial part of the city. The enemy considered this direction as the most dangerous and fortified Zaoskolia with its industrial zones. In the end, it missed the fairly quick movement of the RF armed forces after crossing the Oskil and consolidating on the western bank. This is already a traditional mistake for the AFU, an erroneous choice of direction as the main one for the strike of Russian troops, and a long realization of their error. The inertia of the Kyiv headquarters is mainly related to internal political considerations. Few risk admitting mistakes that lead to the loss of tactical, let alone strategic objects. Hence the absence of orders to withdraw from failed positions. In addition, the AFU has been removing reserves from the Kupiansk direction either to the Kursk region or to Toretsk, and now to Pokrovsk and Dobropilya. As a result of such chess, all directions may collapse at once simultaneously. The value of Kupiansk as a strategic position is enormous. First, it is the largest logistics point in the region with a railway junction, an old transport hub, and repair workshops. At the same time, it is located relatively close to the Russian border, which facilitates its use as a transport hub. Second, relying on Kupiansk, it is possible to strengthen positions in the Kharkiv region and question the AFU's use of, for example, the city of Chuhuiv as a transshipment base for supplying the Sloviansk-Kramatorsk agglomeration in the DPR from the north. Third, from Kupiansk, the road opens to Izium and Balaklia, that is, a direct path to encircling Sloviansk and Kramatorsk from the north. A prospective exit to the Oskil reservoir downstream questions the very possibility for the AFU to hold Izium and Sloviansk for long. Such a maneuver is visible in the context of the proximity of the final cleanup of the Serebryansky forestry, with further advance to Siversk and Krasny Lyman. This will reformat the entire situation on the northern sector of the line of contact. In a broad sense, the occupation of Kupiansk marks the transition to large-scale strategic operations for the liberation of the northern part of the DPR, Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. However, the operation to liberate it from the AFU is still at the very beginning. The AFU's resistance will increase as we advance toward the fortified multi-story urban development, but it is not as high-rise and voluminous as in Uledar. The operation itself is being carried out according to the Uledar scenario. First, cutting off transport communications depriving the AFU of supplies and blocking retreat routes. Then, sequential clearing of the urban development. The difference from Uladar is that the clearing will take place in 2 stages, as it were. In the first, the main part of the city up to the N26 highway, and then the eastern industrial part, unless they surrender earlier, of course. Well, that's all for today on the situation at the front. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss new videos and always stay up to date with the latest events and news.